I'm Armando.
And today we're going to be talking about functions. So to declare a function, we're going to start just like anything else with a special let keyword so we can declare it, and then we're going to follow it by the name that we're going to use to call the function.
And then after we set up a name for the function, then you put an equal sign, and then following that follows your the parameters that are going to actually be used as like the inputs for this function.
And after that, we're going to have a semicolon, and we're going to specify our return type. So our return type is whatever we're going to return to the user for them to be able to use once the function is done.
And then following that, there's a little special symbol that you use to open up your actual function. So here we would use an equal sign and an arrow, sort of just to signify, okay, now we're going to start the function. Then open up the brackets, and then there your actual function body is going to be there.
So for today, we thought that since it's National Puppy Day, that we're going to create a little bit of info about ourselves as puppies. So our first function is going to be called PopName.
So the first function we're going to work on is a function that's going to transform your name to a puppy name. So for this one, we're just going to do let PopName, which is going to be the name of this function, equals s:string. So this is the actual parameter that's going into our function, which is just going to be named s. And then it's going to return a string as well as our output. So now inside the function, we're going to just return the first letter of the string we sent in as our parameter, and then just append uppy after it. So if we're going to take Mary, for example, we'll get the first letter in her name, M, and then just put uppy. So this is going to be Muppy.
Our return statement might look a little bit confusing because we're accessing s like an array. A cool thing about strings, that just as a fun little tidbit, is that they actually work as an array of smaller strings that are just letters. So if we access s at 0, that will take the first letter from whatever string you put in there. So when we call it and say PopName and in parentheses Mary, that's going to take the first letter M and append it to uppy in this function call and return that back to the user. So if we were to print that out, Muppy is what would be printed. For our second function, we wanted to know how old we are in dog years. So if I were a puppy, how old would I be? So we're going to start off with our special let keyword once again, and then the name of our function, which is dog years. After that, we're going to follow it up with our parameters. So our parameters for this one's going to be a little bit different. It's going to take in 2 parameters. So we're going to start with n, which is a number, and then to signify that there's going to be another parameter, we just follow it with a comma, and then the name and type of our other parameter, which in this case is going to be s, which is a string. And then we're going to follow that up by a return type, which is also going to be a string. So once we get into our function, we're going to return s plus is plus n divided by 7 plus in dog years. So the reason there's so many plus signs is that we're concatenating this string all together, right? So we're going to take our string, tie it to is, and then we have n divided by 7, which is our calculation for how old I would be as a puppy, and then we're going to tie that to in dog years.
Okay. So now once we have our main function, in here is where we can actually like print off what we want to actually get from dog years and PopName all together. So the function we're going to print is going to be dog years, and so we're going to have dog years as the function name followed by parentheses, and in here we're going to set up our arguments. So let's go back to Mary for an example. So she's 20 years old, so she will put 20 there, and then since we want to get her puppy name, we can also use the PopName function to get her puppy name from there. So then we would just do something like PopName, another parentheses, Mary. Alright, so now we're going to talk about a function that inside of its body actually has 2 return statements. So for this function, we're just going to call it is good, like to signify if a dog is good or bad. So for this function, we're just going to take in one parameter, which is a boolean, and it will just return a string. So inside the actual body, we're going to set up an if statement that says if your boolean is true, then you're going to return the string good dog. And then outside of that if statement, we're just going to say return naughty pup.
So when we call this function, we'll say is good, and in parentheses we'll enter a Boolean value because that's the kind of argument that this function takes in, which we know that because we specified it in our parameters, right? So as an argument for this one, we're going to pass in true because if I were a dog, I think I'd be a good dog. So if we go into the function, it's going to be true that our dog is good, and so we're going to hit the first return statement that says good dog, and we're going to immediately be done with the function. Once we hit that return statement, or any return statement in a function, you jump out of the function, you're done. So that second return statement will never be touched if our dog is good. So the thing is, if we call this function, it's not actually going to print anything out to our developer's environment because we haven't told it to print anything. It's just returning something to the user. So in this case, we could store it in a string, like let s, which is a string, equal is good, and our argument be true, and then that will store good dog into our string s. Now if we wanted to, we can, like the previous examples, say print is good and put our argument as like false, and then naughty pup is what will be printed out.